Welcome to the continuing music technology guest lecture series of 2021. I am delighted to welcome today Nick Hwang, who will be delivering a presentation for us. He is a composer and sonic artist whose work explores connections in art, technology, and interaction. He is currently an assistant professor at the University of Wisconsin at Whitewater. Nick earned his PhD in compositional and experimental music and digital media at the Louisiana State University and holds a master's degree in music composition from Louisiana State University and a Bachelor of Arts in Theory and Composition from the University of Florida. His teachers have included numerous people who are all great. Welcome, Professor Hwang, and thank you again for being here today and sharing with us your work and what's going on. And with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you for having me. Uh, I've picked a few things out today to share, namely some of the things that have sort of led up to what I feel like has been a, a set of work that I've been focusing on for maybe the past year, sort of brought on by the pandemic. So there are some things that I'm going to touch on from several years ago that I feel like have led up to what I think is interesting or wish that I had back in that time. I'm leading off with this image of me in this created space that my collaborator Tom Lapan and I created back in grad school, where we wanted to create a sonic environment, which involved in a created environment where you walked in, and this is a uh, long exposure shot, so it was very dark, and you had these lit orbs that helped guide your way. And if you didn't have them, then it would be very, very dark for you. And as you approached certain areas in the space, we I wanted to have the space sort of react to your presence. And so some of the areas that you see that are more white have sets of LEDs in them that would pulsate, and sound would accompany you as you approach certain parts of this space. And so there's corners and there's areas that you can walk around, pillars, and these are all things that we sort of constructed with lumber and paper mache and trash bags and actual moss. And we used light sensors and proximity sensors and Max on the back end to see and sort of feel you when you were moving around in that space. Let's see. Let's go to the next slide. So I'm going to talk about a lot of things that are mainly. I feel like I do a lot of interactive stuff, and I've done a lot of different types of things in terms of um, two things that I feel like are what have driven me for the past decade or so is the extending physicality and then also incorporating people in your art or music making. And I had been very interested in making different types of controllers for a while, and for things that made sound. And so a couple things that I'll touch on really briefly are stuff for laptop orchestra, where I'm using different types of controllers. I did a suite of for Wiimote, and then creating physical objects that you had to touch and feel, and had an element of you moving them around and pressing buttons that sort of extended that physicality to it. Along the way, I'm a composer and sonic artist, but I had done some things in the past, and I along with those things of teaching at the University of Wisconsin at Whitewater, I'm also an ultimate frisbee coach, a father, and I dabbled in some extra work back in the day. And so in one of the Pitch Perfect movies, you'll catch me in the background acting as a music producer in the scene with uh, Snoop Dogg. Yeah,
That's amazing. I had no idea.
it's that thing is like 30 minutes into the movie. Um, of course, I run a lot of music and different types of music. Here's an example. This is pre-pandemic, before Zoom or was as popular, and I'm rehearsing with a friend of mine who was playing a piece for saxophone, and we're using Skype, and I think that helped sort of was a prelude to what we are all used to now. Um, There's a few examples for music stuff that I'm not gonna really touch on too much. I've written some music for physical movement, for dance, as well as traditional ensembles and mixed ensembles as well. Um, for me, interactive communication is exchange of ideas where both participants, whether human or machine or art form, are active. It can have an effect on one another. It's a dynamic two-way flow of information. And so I like to think about this definition when I'm making different types of art or projects. And since the pandemic, the idea of being able to share information or data flow to allow this two-way information has been the crux of what myself and collaborators have been working on. That's one of the things I'll touch on later. Um, these are diagrams that I probably shouldn't just get into, but let's talk on some projects that I've done in the past. Um, Back around when I was in grad school around 2009 at Louisiana State University, I was involved with their laptop orchestra, which opened my eyes to a lot of different ways of making music using a specific machine all of the time, that you might swap out different types of applications or tools coding to make this machine do different types of musical processes, and communication was very interesting to me. And then being able to use that machine to take in other types of controllers. And so when I was planning out this suite for Wiimote performers, I did a piece, what the freak, and what the pluck, and they were all for Laptop Orchestra plus Wiimote. And in designing all of these sorts of things, I really wanted to draw on what people were used to in terms of physicality, and then also diagram what could be done on those controllers. And so I worked a lot on thinking about what a performer could do. And one of my friends, Jeff Albert, who is in Louisiana, um, made this face of him playing this piece. This is a shot I love to use because he really gets into it. Um, Into that, the interface for creating these types of pieces were have always been interesting to me. So this is, of course, a presentation view of a Max interface, and one side on for your screen, the performer screen, shows what a performer might look like holding onto the Wiimotes, and I've sort of diagrammed what the button positions might be. There's the joystick and the buttons, and some information about how you might receive incoming performance directions in that incoming message box. And then one of the things that was always has always been arduous to me in terms of connecting computers is setting up things like machine alias names, and then setting ports and stuff like that. And anyone who's familiar with that, um, that's probably like their least favorite thing about doing network performance. On the controller screen, this is a way that for the director would send messages to each performer about how to perform using the Wiimotes, and then there's some shorthand or quick notes that you can see on the right side panel that they could say, oh, play a certain single pitch or change pitch. Along the way, I was using things like TouchOSC to to modify performers' um, instrument parameters like note length, flange, rate, delay mixes. Uh, Second version of this was What the Freak, and this is mostly just an extension of the Wiimote, and I was thinking more about the performance, and I've stripped away what the direct buttons that I want you to press, and I gave you more of a gestural instruction, and we were thinking about what a performer would need to see, and I was using sort of performance or plain English directions, like make eye contact with somebody, and then you could see a preview of what the next instruction would be. I think I had that question, but so the two main instruments that I sort of wanted to show off was the shaker-like instrument where you would hold it and it would swap depending on how you oriented this instrument. So the other side was more of a pluck type of instrument, and the gestures in the end would be different, right? When you're holding it more upright, you had more tone-like sounds, and then if you turn the Wiimote to the side, you had more of a shaker type of sound. The last one in the grouping of three is for what the what is called what the pluck, and this is one where I wanted to have the Wiimote performers have a string like sound and string like performance gestures, and so um, in this instance this moves away from the plain English and text-based instructions, and they were actually reading notes. And so this is the on the side you would see on the left side you would see the performance instructions, and they would be reading off a score. And so you can see the wheat cellos 1 and 2 on the bottom staves, and 3 and 4 on the bottom staves, and they could either do a bow-like sound or an arc-like sound, arco, or a pizzicato type of sound. And so there was a progression between just reading instructions on how to play the instrument to having a knowledge on how to play it and then interpret musical notation. After that, I did a little workshop at Stanford, which sort of opened my eyes into instrument building, because the Wiimotes were a pre-built object that I harnessed into making that grouping of three for Wiimote controllers, and I learned things about using things like an Arduino and attaching to a Raspberry Pi, and all the electrical engineering concepts that I had never ever thought about. And one of the first instruments that I made was this shaker type of instrument made out of a gourd with embedded buttons and accelerometer, and some pads that you could tap the bottom, and you could have, a few different types of controls. After this, still at LSU as a grad student, I went and collaborated with my professor Jesse Allison, and we made this social structure installation. And this was using acrylic blocks with embedded transducers in them, and so the blocks would vibrate with sound as you placed them on a platform, which had metal bars that conveyed the audio signal onto the blocks. And not only was the audio signal sent through the blocks, but also power to light some infrared LEDs, which conveyed to a facing camera with an IR lens filter the position of each block. And so as we moved these blocks around, we could get positional data and project specifically to those blocks and not anywhere else. The construction of it was really fascinating to me, because coming back from making that gourd instrument, I was really interested in making original hardware and controllers. And so working with a laser cutter for the acrylic, and soldering the little bits and pieces for the batteries and the transducers were really, really fascinating to me. And to figure out a clever way to place these blocks around so that I could get the energy to convey the sound, as well as the lights were really nice too. Here's a couple shots of what I designed to maximize the amount of acrylic that we could have, and then we'd feed this into the laser cutter, and then we'd use some really caustic adhesive to make the acrylic come together. Highly suggest you do this outdoors if you're ever doing something like that. Oh yeah, so you can see that on the upper left we're using copper tape to have those contact points from the platform be conveyed into the blocks themselves. Here's a short video of this.
These suits are not my own.
Social structure is a collection of position-aware resonant acrylic cubes that, depending on their placement, respond with varying audio and projected visual. This is achieved through the use of an infrared LED tracking system and 3 dozen sonically aware constructed speaker blocks. Participants arrange these blocks into unique resonant structures. Multi-channel audio is projected in through both the constructed platform and speaker blocks. The blocks form a reconstructible speaker and video surface. As an installation, 3 compositional sections change the modes of interactivity. Unique interactions in relation to the number, position, and the addition-removal blocks change over time. A microphone and separate computer station allow participants to vocally contribute to the structure and also participate virtually through Twitter. The visualizations in social structure are taken from networks like Flickr and Facebook and all point towards our obsessive use and interaction with social media. The installation is capable of projecting these visualizations in a variety of foreground and background configurations that include individual images, composite, and/or video overlay. Social structure exists in 2 versions, an 18-minute performance version and in a continuously running installation mode. Robust and built for travel, the work can be set up and functioning within 4 hours and run up to 12 hours a day. The performance space must be at least 20 by 20 by 10 feet and capable of being completely dark.
Okay, one of the downsides from that project was that we had individual batteries that had to be taken out and charged individually, and so like the acrylic cases eventually did get some wear on them because we had to take them off, and they had to be fastened enough so that they wouldn't fall apart in participants' hands.
I do remember seeing that in person at some conference, and I don't remember which one. Seamus, maybe, or
we showed them at, I think, Nime and Seamus, I believe.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Beyond that, I had this fascination of how to take move beyond just physical objects and then also incorporate your body more. And I did a number of different things. The transportal, which was meant to be a portal on 2 sides of our LSU of our campus at LSU, where you could do game-like scenarios or mostly making music depending on your body positions at the time. And then using the Kinect again, being able to have experience different types of art. And so Pantarea was a series of artists' work that they, in and of itself, was very interesting. There was 2 artists that traded off in scraping away each other's parts of work, and they would, in stages, digitize each phase. And we wanted to take those different phases and have a visitor be able to basically scrub through them with the gesture, and so they could focus on certain parts, zoom in, or see the greater portion, and then also go back in time if they wanted to. Displays of Affection, I think there's a short video for that. Entwined was a pair of sonic installations where the one was a plucked type of instrument where you can see these lines, and every sound that you made on one installation would be transported to the other one, and you would hear it on that end. And this upper one was a sort of like a spandexy material, and we had since the Kinect in the back measuring depth, where you would press on certain areas and that would react with sound. And so there was an interconnection with each other, and one would sound on the other based on what you were doing. Yeah, so you can see that some of these are a lot of overlays. So you can decide to sort of scrub through each of them or see what it looked like when you overlaid all of the digitalizations of those different phases. This one's, I'll go through this fairly quickly. And we purposely made it so that you had to have a number of participants, each of them controlling a different part of maybe the location and the zoom, and then which ones you were scrubbing through. So it was more of a collaborative experience. This reflection was more about working spaces and trying to encourage people from in slowing down in where they are in location. And so where we took video or shot, we recorded people walking by certain spaces, and depending on how fast they were moving, um, replays of the past people's passing of that area would replay. And this was done in Max as well. Of course, this technique is just using things like pixel diff, and just over time, the faster that they move, the greater the blur. Slower that they move, less blur.
I really like this idea of rewards for people that interact well with an installation.
Yeah, we were really thinking about like what is the payoff and why, what is there an intended action, or are we moralizing for some sort of a task or behavior, and we wanted to have people slow down and see the past and encourage them to move slowly. Seemed like the best way to do that. And here the collaboration is sort of a collaboration between persons that are in the space currently and then people that have previously been there as well.
2013.
Yeah, that's been a while. Let me zoom ahead because like some of these are older stuff, and we'll talk about some newer things. I gotta get through these slides. Sorry.
Well, I think that's interesting because to do what you said in Jitter in 2013 is different than doing it now.
Yes. Cool. So I worked a lot in this thing called Gua, which comes from the I Ching, and it stems from what my fascination at the time was John Cage's works of and the Gua was like basically the pictogram that was selected based on his stick throwing, and this is basically like a tape technique patch that recorded some audio, and you could manipulate it based on speed, the play rate, add some delay, chorus, pitch, filter, reverb, and in the end, I wanted to be able to do make it into some sort of digital musical instrument, and then transport it to at the time the iPad using TouchOSC, and then made like a audience participation version of it where I'm using web audio and sending audio files that people could do similar actions on the browser. And then there's some performances of using the instrument. We won't get too much into that. So this is still far in the past, and this is the installation that I had mentioned in the past, the environment where people could walk into and using the lights and using things like Macs and Arduino and LEDs and photoresistors and things like that. I created an environment that reacted to it. One of these things that I really love this one because this became an actual space in that when you were in there, you couldn't think about anything else because you were in the space. It was totally encompassing. And I think that one thing that I wish more about in the installation type of art that I make is like how to subtract any type of environment so that audiences are I don't want to use the I word because it's so catchphrasy now, like the idea of immersion, and making sure that they're just thinking about this and not thinking about where they physically are, because this sort of transplanted you to a totally different environment. Along the way, I started using a lot more Arduino-based or sensor-based controllers, and in Baton Rouge in Louisiana, there's this thing called is an art show that we participated in, and we created, it's called the Surreal Salon, and we created a number of surreal artifacts that reacted based on doing really like surreal acts, like putting gold bricks on a little sensor, and we did a exquisite corpse of visitors that came in. So I used Max and photographed everyone that came in there, and based on these surreal acts of maybe placing dominoes on different areas of this sensor array, you change the way that the photos were rearranged on those projected exquisite corpses. So this is the photography phase where people using Max to digitize their portions. I cut it up, and then they would go participate and move those bricks around or cover areas with dominoes. You can kind of see in the background the various speeds and rates that their corpses would be decomposed. And we deliberately sort of obscured what the connection was or the mapping that we had for our controls, because there's a lot of some people try to figure out
about the image. Look. If I cover them all, then they're all covered. Yeah, they're all covered.
Yeah.
You can't see it because of all this.
Trust me, dude. I know, I love it.
Move forward. So part of the research that sort of influenced all of those things, taking in different types of sensor data, microcontrollers, audio synthesis, turned into this instrument that I called AMI, the embedded actuated musical instrument, where I'm using the actuation from the installation from the cubes, social structure, Arduino, microcontrollers, all those things that sort of touched on previously into one instrument that a performer that could read music or musical notation could perform with, and involved fabrication using laser cutters and putting everything in the center of this instrument. I'm using transducers so that the wood of the instrument itself was the one that was affected the tone, and I'm using some game controllers at the top, and I'm borrowing from musical performance gestures, kind of like someone might play for a euphonium, and then also like a keyboard style array to select pitch. This is some early shots of what it looked like.
Use AMI, the actuated embedded musical instrument, capacitive touch, some game controllers, accelerometer, embedded electronics, and it's all the sound comes from the body itself. There's a amplifier knob here that increases the output.
You get the idea. And that was part of my dissertation research at LSU. Moving forward, some of these things are not necessarily sound-based. Of course, it's largely technology-based. We made these things called moving portraits, which sort of borrows on the idea of like a Harry Potter-esque environment where these paintings, or appeared to be paintings, displays on walls with frames on them, would have these sort of idle animations and would react to your presence.
It's in its idle video now, so if you could step closer to it and like make some motions. There we go.
You'll have
Perfect.
an idle animation and then have a more animated one that acknowledged your presence and then sort of did its thing. And then after that, there would be a number of different randomly chosen active videos, and then it would go back to its idle. And so we did a set of these. Some of them were witches, some of them were sort of spellcasters. There's one on the right side, stuff like that. And this kind of goes back into the same tech coding that we did for the displaced.
Yeah, and there's
locations.
another video. Let's see if you can wait.
Hands of Time. This is one that I worked with some students where they were using leap motion.
This is the first time that UW Whitewater has ever been in the final.
And they won an international
And it
competition.
was a pretty
making
surreal
rhythm
feeling to be in the same room as kind of the innovators of this technology.
In this video, it doesn't show the ultra haptic array that we used in the competition. Basically, it's using ultrasonics to give you.
We were the
tactile
only
feedback or
team
haptic
that had
feedback
undergraduate
of
students, and the
doing
rest had
something.
doctoral students.
We all had our different backgrounds. Brandon in the modeling. Nicole and I are both computer science, but I'm music as well. The main motion of the game is you just attach each finger to your thumb, corresponding with when the note shows up on the screen. And based on the amount of notes you get correct, you will get a letter grade and percentage for that song, which will be saved to your profile so you can try to beat it later on. Big thing that we had with ours is the calibration between the fingers. So if a person doesn't have full range of motion between their fingers, that we can calibrate the distance that they can go between the finger and their thumb, so that even if they can only go this far, as long as they reach this threshold, it will still count as if they were going the entire way and making the full range of motion. Another big thing with our game was we wanted to be able to motivate physical hand therapy patients, so that instead of standing and looking at a wall, maybe doing this motion for hours on end, you'd actually have something to look forward to do.
Shows that there's a great program here, great students at Whitewater, and it's not just necessarily linked to the students that did it, but to the program that's growing.
It's really new age technology, and it's definitely going to be the future very soon.
Cool. Into those things, I started to work more into game-like scenarios. Like that last one was obviously a game that we created. We did a number of games that I feel like pushed into my current research now, and angle shooter is one of them. And this could be one thing that you guys can participate in. If you navigate to that web link right there, angle-shooter.herokuapp.com, this will bring up a really simple interface, but it will connect to what is just another simple game. You can see the interface is going to be the controller, and then the game scenario is going to be on my shared screen. So if you log in, you'll see Mark Zuckerberg floating around, and then your intended recipient for some type of electronic or network-based message. And this is part of a show that Jeff Harriet and Professor Bill Miller and I participated in that discussed things like social media and the privacy issues and things like that. And so if you navigate there and ignore the portion that talks about Facebook, but then just sort of type your name in, if you can get there. Do I need to bring the address back up?
Well, I've got it. So
Okay.
I'm typing my name in.
Type your name in, and you should see there's John on the bottom left now. Every time you hit shoot, you're basically sending a packet out there, and if you're lucky, then it doesn't get intercepted by organizations like Google or Instagram or Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg. But beware if you start to spam this button, right? Big Zuck is going to show up, and he will then try to eat everything in sight. So there's a little bit of pathing to your packets, and you might get lucky in that some of these will eventually be received, but most of them you can see in comparison do not.
I've had a 0% success rate.
Yeah, and so this was sort of touching on some technology that we were interested in, being able to have multiplayer type of games that have mobile-based controls. And so a number of these projects that I do after this are based on some of those ideas, and as well as some voice-controlled or participation-based gaming. Let's see. What are you playing? There you go. Two-part installation.
again.
So this is part game, part like art installation where you as a player using your voice, the higher the frequency, your on-screen character would move up or down. And if you made sort of like a fricative sound, then it would fire a projectile that would blast through some of the barriers that could be blasted through. On the other side of it, part of this show about privacy and data collection, we took every time that you made a sound, we made a snippet, a recording of it, and the sound that you heard from the speakers was recycled recordings of those people making sounds. And so we're taking them and using that in a way that wasn't entirely clear. But if you rearrange the blocks in a certain way, it would strip away all the processing, and you would hear basically the guys going and hopefully that idea came through at that time.
I have a technical question about that.
Yeah.
So how are you able to differentiate high-low fricative?
So the fricative was just for shooting the projectile. So like the high or the low for the fricative sense did not make a difference. As long as you made a fricative, then it just made
I guess
projectile.
my question is, how do I know it's a fricative, technically speaking?
Oh yeah. That's a good question. I wasn't involved in that side. It was, Jeff Harriet was the one that did the logic between those sounds. So I'm sure that he used some Max object to do that. So if your question is generally, how would you do that? I'm not sure.
Okay, I don't know either.
Yeah. This is a cat controller game that we won't touch on. Basically, I made a cat controller using the Arduino and using things like Velostat material to be able to detect when you are petting a cat. Maybe you can just watch like a couple seconds of it if there is a video. Let's see. Nope, there isn't. So using a cat controller, the whole point is that you're supposed to pet a cat, and this is in a game-like setting. The cat would make sounds if you're doing it correctly. We had different types of modes. Multiplayer mode. You would give it instructions, and you would pet it in a certain way.
This is possibly the best game ever.
So one of the reasons that we built that game was we wanted to submit it to GDC's alt controller submissions, and we thought that it would be a fun type of game. There aren't too many cat pitting games out there, and we thought that we had the market cornered, but unfortunately we didn't get in that year. Moving into the multiplayer and audience participation music making realm, I made this game, what I call a gameful performance. Arena sequencer, which is built in Unity and Max and Node for Max, and then having a game-like setting where people are launching little things into a game arena and basically building a sequencer along the way. And so with 4 players, every item that you hit would add a different type of sound inside the sequencer based on when you collected it. And then one of the biggest things that I thought was that contributed to this thing is having a bit of audience participation. So kind of like when you were pressing those buttons on your phone, John, you were able to affect the overall performance in you could change the cannon speed of each participation person in the game, and they would have to sort of react because then the cannon would fire a different spot or a different rate. And then you could also add things like the likelihood of a collectible or decrease or increase the tempo along the way. Players use game controllers for the performance, and then audience use their mobile phones, and this is what the audience interface looked like. Rumline is a current ongoing project that Meg Shadle, Brian Smith, and Robert Cosgrove and I are engaged in right now. If you go to Rumline.io to this website here, make sure that you use the HTTPS. It's going to bring you to a website that is about that has a bit of audio to it and has a simple web interface. And this is also a collaborative sort of performance where you are actuating some motorized spindles that are imitating the sounds of frogs. And part of it is a collaborative instrument, as well as bringing awareness to the idea of how frogs will outline a physical space, and the idea that that you can discern the shapes of water-based locations based on the shape of the sound that frogs emit from a certain location. You can see that I'm not touching this interface, but if I imagine that Professor Thompson is interacting with it, or someone is, and as you are tapping out some of these buttons, you should be able to hear the sounds, but also no one else is able to press on those buttons at that same time. If you go to the typical navigation that we saw about this was that you're tapping through this and you're only hearing the sound, and we wanted to sort of pull away that acousmatic veil so that you can then eventually see what the environment looks like. And I think it's still live. It may not be. I thought it was live before the before we started this, but maybe you can't. But basically, you would see a rotating head, a binaural set of head microphones that rotates about, and then a surrounding portion that is the spindles or the frogs that are making those calls. And then this is sort of a zoomed in version of this one. And you can see that when you tap on the perform a call, then the signal will be sent over to that location. What's interesting about this one I find is this is using the tools that I've been slowly working on that allow for collaborative installation making, as well as different types of performance modalities. And so this is using a tool that, where's my slides, is using Collab Hub, which is something I started with Eric Sheffield and Tony Marasco a little bit before the start of the pandemic. And the whole goal was that we wanted to create a seamless or effortless way to connect collaborators that are either in the same location or remote. And we wanted to eliminate the ideas of having to know your IP address and be able to connect with each other. And for this installation is over in New York. And for the person that's using the controller interface for Rumline, we are able to constrain your interactions by knowing who is connected, how many people are connected, what buttons are being pressed. If we go back just briefly, I think I have my Max patch up that is connected to the server. And if you were using it before, let me see. Shadow Hwang collab. Here we go. I'm going to connect to it, and if one of you or can go back to that page, this is the interface that I presented to my collaborators who are in New York, so that they can run the interface that is actually making that sound. And you should be able to see.
Should I hit a button then?
Yeah, can you hit a button? Then we should be able to see. Yeah, we can see these light up, and then they're taking this end and connecting it to their data machines that are actuating the spindles. If you turn the dial, then this is the information that they would receive over there. We can see that there's 5 people that are connected to the server, and then we can constrain the cooldown time basically for those buttons that you see. And so this interface basically is one of the controlling hubs, and there's obviously one in New York that is doing all the decision making in terms of the robots and the spindles that are happening. Back to Colab Hub. Let's see. I'm going to give you guys a preview of what it looks like now. So we've gone through a couple iterations because we started doing this a little bit before the pandemic. And if you go to this location, I apologize, it's a relatively long string. I have a testing version of this that basically shows some functionality that we have for the Colab Hub. And the whole point of it is that we want to be able to send data, control data to each other, and as well as link different types of interfaces. So things like Max, it was our high priority. And then now we're pushing into things like PD and now Arduino, and we're making an interface that is going to be done through Electron. So there's a lot of things that we are very interested in, and let me try to navigate to this page. You should see something like this. It's relatively on the pretty side. It's not very pretty, but you should be able to see who's connected, and you can change your name. Right now I see that there's a person named Artie. I'm going to change my name to Nick. And depending on the way that you've chosen to share your information, you can trigger events, and these will be pushed to everyone that's there. And hopefully you saw an incoming message up at the top of your browser. If anyone that's on here also, if you can click on this, hopefully I can see that as well.
Oh, what should we click on now?
The push all. So
Push
web event 3. So an incoming event will trigger on the browser to let you know that this has happened, and then eventually there's a cooldown, and it'll eventually it'll detach itself from the web DOM. And there we have 2 main paradigms. One is pub sub environment, and one that's push. And so depending on what your interaction goals are, maybe you're a laptop orchestra, or just one that you want to trigger some events for people that are performing remotely, just so that you can start your patches all together. This is a great way to do that. And none of it involves IP addresses or ports. And so let me bring up a Max patch that shows, let's see, who can I see? This is a working prototype that Eric is working on the Max end. And if I connect to the server, I can see, oh, there's Artie, there's John, there's me, and we should be able to push some values to you. So I think this portion works without crashing the server at the moment. You should be able to see that I'm using my slider, and on the values, you should be able to see that push value is going off. And the whole goal of it is you can have a web interface if you want to, if you're just not making audio. But if you're using Max to do things like video or audio, this is a great way to be able to connect to each other, send relevant information. There's room-based communication, chat communication. Some of these that say publish 1, 2, 3. This means that this information is going to be shared amongst people that are either have taken on a username of 1, 2, 3, or are in a room called 1, 2, 3. And so you can send data in all sorts of configurations or topologies in a really sort of seamless way. Cool. That's sort of a preview. I know that visually it's not that great, but this is just sort of like a testing purposes to be able to see what we're able to do. And you can join different types of rooms, see other types of controls that you can be a subscriber to. And then also, yeah, the rooms are down here, and these are the events. So if you subscribe or observe an event, anyone that triggers that particular event name, you will receive it into either your Max patch, your PD environment, or this web browser. Next thing, let's let's see. Oh yeah, here's a quick video about
Okay, I'm gonna
me
demo
showing off to my collaborators.
connecting PD, an instance of PD, to a new Colab client that can interface with PD. So I'm going to start up the client. That's a node instance. And it's going to sign into the original Colab hub, so version 1. And then I'll tell PD to talk to the node instance that's connected. And you'll notice that I have a socket ID that's connected to Colab hub. And this max patch was the original Colab hub instance, and it has both the socket ID that is the version that shows up here, that is the same one here. And so from there, I will, let's see, what can I do? I will bring up a third instance, which is the web interface, and I'm going to tap this web event here, and the PD is going to be routing that web event. So zoom out a little bit. I'm going to push this button here on the web interface, and we should see that bang light up here. And the max instance sees that too, so 2 clients are able to see that happening. Of course, you can see that here as well. So we know that that's happening there, and I'm going to send some information from PD. Let's say that this is a slider. It's going to be foo. I'm able to send that to the server as well. And let's see, does it see it over here? Get controls. Oh, I don't have that linked up yet, but that should be the next thing that can happen, is that some control data should be able to be sent over to the server. But we have it working for events, so that I'm certain that it'll work with control data too. Cool.
So that was a video I sent with my collaborators Eric and Tony when I first got it connected. But the whole point of it is that we want to be able to send this types of data, and there are some applications like PD that you eventually, and Arduino and stuff like that, that you need to eventually do some port identification. But with Max, it's seamless. And the whole point that in times that you do need to identify what your ports are, we are building in an application through Electron that'll talk you through those steps. And so we want to make it as painless as possible. Some outlets that we're using this as well is to make other types of physical installations that also make sound be able to communicate with each other in both local and remote locations. And we see the opportunity to do this because, you know, people are, I wish that I had this tool maybe like 10 years ago, because being able to connect people in different types of topologies, different types of layouts where it's maybe room-based or subscriber publisher scenarios, or pushing just some data around would have been made life so much easier. And so Tony focuses on hardware, and he's interested in doing things for Arduino, SP32 devices. He's also doing it for like monome type of rigs that you can upload different patches. And so we want to have an element that also connects audio-wise, because that's something that's missing. We're looking into WebRTC to be able to have smaller groups be able to send their audio signals that they're sharing, maybe in Max or PD, through the web as well. One of the things that we started to use Colab Hub was with this group with Eric and Tony and myself and Jeff Harrod and Anna Weisling to demonstrate some of the capabilities. And we came up with a piece called Ship of Theseus, where we're using Colab Hub as the main instigator to share data and also share performance information. So we on this upper left is the instructions that you might receive. So for an individual person, you would get an instruction on this is the gesture you should be performing. This is the next upcoming one. And so you can sort of see some parallels early on based on the Wiimote stuff that I was giving you previews on what you're going to do next. And these other ones are instructions that the other collaborators are. So let's say that this is me. This could be Jeff's image. This is Tony's image. This is Eric's image. So I sort of know what everyone else is doing. This is our typical Max interface so that I can send some data. Maybe I'm using my patch to control different aspects that are affecting Jeff's instrument, right? So maybe I'm using this guy. And so I'll map a slider that's going to change Jeff's delay line, something like that, right? And so he will have an accompanying module that connects to Colab Hub, and he's getting that data that's going to be changing his instrument. We're also using this to help change the visual end. Anna is a visual artist using Max. And so during performances, we are also changing some of her parameters as she is changing ours. I thought I had this video on here. Maybe I don't. But yeah, there it is. Cool. I'll just jump to a spot where you can see some of this. I'm sorry. Cool. So you kind of get the idea. And so this piece by nature is improvisatory, though we have structured it so that these images have a palindromic um, repetition to them. So along the way, performers will get a combination of either sound or control type of images, interpret them, and be aware of what the other person is doing. And some of them might say control, and so your task is to interpret this and send some control data over to the other person's instruments and affect some of their output.
What sort of latency are you dealing with here?
the since we're just dealing with controlled audio, it's generally less than a second, so it's not instantaneous for sure. And then basically because like Tony is in Texas, Jeff, Harriet, and I are both in Wisconsin, Anna and Eric are in New York. There is invariably some type of latency, because it does go to a centralized server and then back out to everyone else.
Yeah. What it reminds me of, well, thank you too.
Yeah.
What it reminds me of is, or what I kept thinking was the work being done at LSU, that was dealing with laptop ensemble a long time ago, and I'm not sure it still continues, but trying to make it easier to set up pieces. Because of the very things you're talking about, like let's get everybody's IP address. I mean, how long is this going to take? And it's never if you don't have a good system, never fun to do that. And so I can see the direct connection there in this sort of work where the solutions that you're coming up with are interesting.
Yeah, I think that being a part of LSU and through the time that we started the laptop orchestra, and then going through those phases of us trying to figure out the best ways to do things or figure out new ways to do things. As I was there when they were using the Grendel system, which is kind of being able to connect each other and then pull up specific pieces. I thought that idea was really great, and part of the inspiration for Collab Hub as well. I think that's it. All the stuff I had to share. I know that kind of went on some.
Oh no, it was really great. I really appreciate you sharing that. I think what's really interesting, and it seems to be a common thread with many of the people I've had here, is all the different hats that people wear when they seem to come up with this idea that they're going to be a composer. What does that mean when you're young?
Yeah.
And then what you actually end up doing, and how musical training or background influences those decisions. I think it's really interesting. And maybe you have some thoughts about that you can share with us about, you branch out into all these areas, networking, electronics, media art, all with the under the umbrella of, at some point I'm a musician, right? So maybe you have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, this question comes to me, often, because, and oftentimes I ask myself, like, am I composing? Am I a musician at this moment when I'm doing this thing? And when I'm making tools like Collab Hub, right? I've sort of reassured myself that I still am, because I'm enabling myself and other people to use this type of tool. And we purposely picked the name Ship of Theseus because there's a common process, and I think that it's something that we may not eventually escape from, in that when we make complicated systems using technology, oftentimes we start from zero and then go to something, right? And then if we want to make a different version of it, we are recobbling what exists and then making it fit another purpose. And the whole Ship of Theseus is this idea that this question that the philosophical question, where when Theseus left on his voyage, he had one ship, and along the way he's plank by plank replacing bits of it, and that by the time he comes back on his journey, is this the same ship or a different ship? By the time he returns, right, where he's replaced almost everything, is it actually the same ship, right? And so the idea of making technology so that you can use it yourself and other people has been a really big inspiration for myself, because I want people to use Collab Hub, because I've been through this pain of having to rebuild technology that allows me to connect to other people. And if people can use this tool so that they can make music, and this is a leap for them, or it just cuts out some portion of pain, then I've definitely done my job, right? And in the end, like, the last couple weeks, I've felt happy with where Collab Hub is, and I'm on to the next phase of making a new piece. And so I know what the idea of my musical work is going to be now that I know how Collab Hub behaves. And so almost everyone that's been involved with Reshifter is now coming up with ideas on how to use Collab Hub for newer pieces for us, because throughout the pandemic we have a weekly jam where we're just playing something like this, and we're just making music along the way. And thank goodness for this tool, because I don't think that it would be a completely different experience. I think that even if you're not writing down notes or playing an instrument, making sound, if your intention is to push forward in sort of that type of realm, you still could be called yourself a musician. I don't think anyone's going to deny you that, and I hope not to deny myself that thought, because I'm trying to make tools that make the music portion of it easier.
Yeah, and you're doing a great job at it too. So someone counters me and says it's not a lot of hats. It's just one really elaborate and colorful hat with a with a fan maybe. So yeah, I think that's really fascinating. And you know, you're not alone, like I said, of people that I know. It seems that where I wonder if the field of what it means to be a composer really maybe branches out to what does it mean to be a media artist.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because
I think that's a really good question. And you know, there has been a time, you know, in my mind when I'm asking myself, am I really a musician? Am I a composer? While I'm doing all those things, and there, you know, in the darkest of times, like I almost was willing to cross off composer or musician, because I'm spending so much time learning some technology or some new language, and then making this thing work into this type of non-musical shoebox, right? And I think it's okay to think about it that way, but I feel like I'm bringing in things as well to the musical world, so that people that aren't really have no knowledge about how to share control data through the internet can do their music.
Yeah.
And it's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's more than okay. I think it's really good, actually. And exciting. I mean, it's exciting work.
Yeah. The next phase is that we're hoping that me, Eric, and Tony are looking to build a bunch of modules that we're going to share for Macs and PD and other environments that are like out of the box. If you and your pals download this package, can start to make some music. We'll show you how to connect them. We'll have some simple synths or sequencers and stuff like that you can just easily test it out and then mod it out the way that you like. But the connection part of it, we've handled for you.
Yes. Well, I think with that, does anyone have any questions or comments from Andrew or Alex or Ryan? There's just comments in the chat. It says, love the presentation. Very impressive. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I think if anyone comes up with questions or things they would like to know that maybe pop up later, I'm sure that you can always send out an email. And
definitely. And yeah, feel free to contact me.
Yeah. I may end up doing that on a rewatch of this video because there was a lot of material here to draw from, and I was particularly interested in the trajectory that you took from 2009 to now. It's really fascinating, actually, and you can kind of see the thread, which, you know, sometimes I suppose isn't intentional. It just ends up that way, but it seems to have a lot of intent to it.
Yeah, I don't think that I had the forethought, like at 2021, this is what I'd be doing.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah, looking back, it sure does seem inevitable, doesn't it? And
yeah.
Well, I thank you very much again for your time and the presentation. I thought it was really great. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
All right, and with that, I will end this presentation. Thank you, everyone.